One. It has never done that before. Good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is our question and answer with an attorney night, and I'm super excited to hear some of the questions that you might have. And we have Mr. Reed, is it Martz? Is that correct? Right. Mr. Yep. Reed Martz and Mr. Mike Jennings here tonight with us to answer your questions. And I hope that you brought some to the table so that we can have a good conversation. And gentlemen, if you would like to take turns and just tell the kids what you do, just a little bit about yourselves, and then however you want to go from there, if you want to open it up for questions or if you have some information you want to share first. I'm going to mute myself and then the floor is all yours. Thank you so much to both of you for being here.
Sure. Be my guest, Mike.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity, Sandy. I'm Mike Jennings, and I am a graduate of the University of Georgia Law School, and have been practicing law for more than 35 years in Georgia and in Tennessee. I kind of have probably more narrow area of focus in what I do than most lawyers, in that I do a lot of adoptions, and in both states, and have for about that whole period of time. I also do a lot of estate planning and estate administration. So I tell people I'm usually dealing with babies or old ladies, so birth to the grave. So that's kind of what my experience is. Because I'm in a small law firm, though, I end up doing all kinds of little other things, and along the way pick up some knowledge about other areas of the law as well. But I would say that adoptions and probates after someone has died, and estate planning and preparing for death are probably my particular areas of emphasis.
All right. Well, good evening. I'm Reed Martz. I didn't graduate quite that long ago. I went to the University of Mississippi, graduated in 2003. I practiced in Mississippi, and then Alabama, and then Tennessee, and lastly, Georgia. I'm admitted in all four of those states. I moved to the Chattanooga area in June of 2019, as we were discussing earlier, mostly because I like it. I think it's pretty neat. We live on Lookout Mountain, and I like it up here. The family likes it up here, and we've enjoyed our time so far. As far as professionally, I'm in a very small firm. It's my partner and I and some staff members. We handle a variety of things. My partner's practice is much closer to Mike's. He doesn't do adoptions, but he does a lot of estates, and he also does some elder law. So this is an area of law that's developing as our population ages. There's lots of people that are being taken advantage of by neighbors and family members, unfortunately. So he does that. I do mostly litigation, which litigation is when one person sues another person for whatever reason. It could be a work-related injury, which I do a lot of defense on, or it could be a car wreck, or a dispute over a property line, or any number of issues that come up. And then I also do a smattering of everything else, it seems like. But that's me in a nutshell.
Any of you guys have any questions you want to start off with? Katie, I feel like you might have some.
How did you both like discover or decide which area of law you wanted to specialize in?
That's a good question. And in large part, like with my adoption work, and Reed can tell you this, you don't take a class in law school on adoptions. I mean, it's too narrow a niche. There might be a chapter in a domestic relations book that talks about adoption, but no, it never occurred to me that that would be something that I would fall into. And, you know, when you get to be my age, you do a lot more looking backwards than looking forwards. And so when I look backwards, I can see how things kind of fell into place to where it kind of became an area of specialty for me. And when I came up to town in Chattanooga, I was hired by what at the time was the largest law firm in the state of Tennessee. It had all of 35 lawyers. And I worked for the senior partner, and he called me into his office one day and he said, I just got off the phone with one of our biggest clients, and he and his wife have found a woman who is expecting a baby in Dalton, Georgia. And he wants us to help him with an adoption. And he called and asked if we knew how to do that. And I told him we certainly did, and we would take care of it. And then he looked at me and he said, nobody here has ever done an adoption, and you need to figure it out. So I did. And that experience, I know when we left the courtroom, after all, there was a lot of work involved in an adoption like that, a private placement from a woman who was expecting. I mean, I literally went down to the hospital in Dalton, and they discharged the baby to the lawyer. They wouldn't discharge the baby to the family. And so I carried, this was July of 1987. It was a long time ago. So I carried the baby out of the hospital, and they were working on the parking lot. And so there was a shuttle that drove you to a satellite parking lot. So I have this newborn baby in this bag of diapers and bottles that they had given me. I had to sign all the papers where it said mother. I had to sign that. And then I carried that baby on that shuttle to the satellite parking lot, and where my clients met their child, their daughter, for the first time. And that's how the adoption started. And it ends with a court hearing. And when we left the courtroom, the adoptive mother, who was probably maybe 5'2" and might have weighed 100 pounds, she looked at me and she says, "Is it over now?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, it's over." And she said, "And no one can take my baby away from me?" And I said, "No, ma'am, no one can take your baby away from you." And she gave me a hug and she picked me off the ground. And I thought to myself in that moment, most lawyers don't get this kind of affection from their clients. This is pretty cool. And so anyway, it rocked along, and the state of Tennessee had a pretty workable adoption code, or a pretty simple adoption code, that a few years later got completely revised, much more complicated, much easier now to make a mistake. So most lawyers in town decided, I'm not going to figure that out to do 1 or 2 adoptions a year. So they all quit doing them. And so now, like in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, there's about 1,100 lawyers, and I do more adoptions every year than all of the rest of the lawyers put together. It just kind of developed that way. Didn't start out that way. So Katie, I had no idea I would ever do an adoption. And now I do hundreds of them a year. And it's just kind of, some would call that kind of happenstance, or, it's just happened. And I kind of think it's kind of providential, because it's something I really have enjoyed doing.
Well, that's a great story, Mike. I've done a couple, 3 adoptions. Nobody ever lifted me off the ground. It is fun, though, taking the staged photo in front of the judge. I've gotten to do that a few times. But to your question, I went to law school because I wanted to be an FBI agent. I didn't have any interest in the law. My father was a lawyer, or is a lawyer. He retired, but I wasn't interested in law. There were a couple different tracks that you could take to get into the FBI. One of them was military service, one was police service, and then the other was some sort of graduate degree, including law. So I said, I'll go to law school. My grades were pretty good, and I got a really good scholarship to stay where I was, which was the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. So I stayed there, and I got married right before I started law. And I had my first child right before I graduated. And I started looking around at graduation saying, hey, I need a job. And I don't know that I want to leave my newborn and go off to the FBI Academy and all that other stuff. Plus, I wasn't in the FBI. So I started looking for a job fairly feverishly and found a job. And they told me what kind of law I would be practicing in exchange for my paycheck. And I said, that sounds good. I'll be there Monday morning. So that's how I got into it. And that is primarily how I got into workers' compensation. A lot of other things have developed. The homeowners associations and some business and lots of real estate and that sort of stuff just kind of came through people I knew and opportunities. Being in a small firm, I don't answer to a boss anymore. So I answer to a lot of bosses. They're called clients, but I don't have one guy over me telling me this is what you're going to do today and so forth. So I get to pick to some degree, and I'm in the process of reevaluating that and going to try to streamline some of my practice in the future. But that's one of the good things about the law is, and one of the things I appreciate, you can govern that a lot. There are certain things that you can't do. Every job has its downsides, but I have a lot of flexibility, and I appreciate that. I'm not very good at taking instruction, and unfortunately, I pass that along to my kids who are terrible at taking instruction. I hope you're better than they are. But it also gives you kind of an independent spirit when, if you're not going to listen to anybody, you better sure as heck figure it out. So that's how I got to do what I do, and why it will probably change over time.
Yeah, that's a good point, Reed. And Katie, surveys say that a good percentage, maybe more than a majority of lawyers practicing law today, when asked the question, if you had it to do over again, would you go into the practice of law? And there's a large percentage of lawyers that say no. And that's because maybe they made a choice to go into that profession based upon what they had seen on TV or in movies or whatever, and it didn't turn out quite like they like. And Reed can tell you if and it doesn't really matter what area of law you're practicing, you're going to have confrontational kind of situations, and you have to be comfortable in handling those. At the same time, I like what I do in that I end up at the end of the day, I can think back about how many people that actually help, and I mean really help. And so some law is big and it's corporate, and some law is very personal. And I think that in what I do, for the most part, when somebody tries to get me on the phone, it's probably the most important thing on their agenda that day is to try to get me on the phone because something has come up in their family's life, whether it's a birth of a child, or whether it's a death of a family member, or whether it's planning for these events. It's pretty significant. And so I find it personally to be pretty rewarding in this little area of the law that I have found myself in. So, but I tell people, this isn't like going to college and then thinking, what do I want to do? And I don't really know what I want to do. So I'll go to law school. Reed can tell you that law school is kind of hard. It's 3 years long. It's quite a commitment. And then you get out and you may find yourself working really long hours and doing something that you really don't like to do. But then again, as Reed says, you can, there's lots of things you're qualified to do. So you may take a lot of moving around before you find something that really feels like it fits.
Go ahead, Blake.
This one's for Mike. So you said that you weren't planning on being an adoption lawyer, but then you went into it after, I think, maybe a year or two of being a lawyer. But what made you decide to be a lawyer in the first place?
Well, I was a good student, and I enjoyed reading and writing, which is helpful in law school. And my dad told me I like to argue a lot and that maybe I should consider being a lawyer. So he told me that in a cafeteria after church one Sunday. And I thought about that. That sounds kind of cool. So it just seemed to fit. And so I did it. And I mean, maybe I just kind of found my niche without thinking about it too hard. I don't know. I didn't have a really good reason to go to law school other than that, because I didn't really know any lawyers. So it's not like, Reed's dad's a lawyer. He knew something about what lawyers do. I didn't know any lawyers until I got into law school. So.
Surely you have more questions.
Katie does. She's waiting on her Jake or Allie to ask them before she asks another one, being polite. Go ahead, Katie.
Katie, you want to study political science, is that right?
That's correct. I'm
Yeah,
on the pre-law track at MTSU.
yeah. Maybe that is one of the reasons I went to law school, because I was a political science major at the University of Georgia. And when you graduate with that and look around, what are you going to do?
Same here.
You're kind of locked into that.
Yeah.
I
That's one of
actually-
those liberal arts degrees. You better have a plan for the next step.
Yeah. I actually don't have any more questions.
Katie, you were trying or thinking about going into the FBI through the legal path, right?
It was something that I was thinking about, yes.
Okay.
A couple of
Okay.
years ago, though.
But now you're more into international law, right?
Correct. With like
So
the
it'll
state
change
law.
2 more times before you graduate college.
As it should.
Allie, Jake, do you have anything?
Go ahead, Jake.
I don't know if you guys said this already, but how much kids have you adopted from when you first started?
Like, do you mean how many adoption cases has Mike done? Because
Yes.
Reed mentioned he's done a couple.
Well, Reed's actually adopted. I haven't. So
Mhm.
he's got more that kind of experience than I've got. But in terms of cases, I might do, I don't know, 200, 250 a year. But those are all stripes and flavors. So they're not carrying the baby out of the hospital and carrying the baby to the parents. I mean, that happens, but that's the exception. To do lots of, I work a lot with DFACS in Georgia and Department of Children's Services in Tennessee. And, when there are situations where parents are unable to parent well and the state has to intervene and kids go into foster care. And oftentimes, like I think maybe some Pricer kids, they have the good fortune of finding a family where they are adopted into that family. And I do those adoptions. There's a lot of people that have kids and then they get divorced and then they remarry. And so the new spouse wants to adopt the child, step-parent adoptions, a lot of those, in large part because of problems with drugs in our society. So I do lots of grandparent adoptions where the parents have found themselves unable to parent. A grandparent might come in. I've done a lot of international adoptions from kids born overseas, which has slowed to a trickle for different reasons, but used to be probably 15 years ago, we did lots of international adoptions. You don't see a lot of them anymore, but we do those. And then, we finalize, like in Reed's case, he's adopted some kids, I think, through Bethany in Mississippi. And we do lots of agency adoptions. We represent Bethany actually here in town and help them terminate the rights of parents, and sometimes voluntarily and sometimes involuntarily. So lots of different kinds of adoptions.
So Reed, your experience is a little different. What than Mike's? So you mentioned you like to argue as well. And what is the most interesting, I guess, I don't want to say case because I know that you can't really talk about those, much, but like, what is the most interesting about your job, or maybe the most interesting case that you've had?
Well, I'd have to think for a while about the most interesting case. There have been a lot of them that are pretty fascinating. But the one that comes to mind that's fairly exemplary of what else I was going to say is a lady by the name of Martha Stanford. This was years ago. It was a workers' compensation case. And one of the things that I really like about the law is just digging down into the details and trying to cross-reference and investigate. I in my mind's eye, I'm one of these detectives on TV, piecing everything together and doing all, in reality, it's much more pathetic than that. I'm some guy sitting around pushing paper, but that's what my mental image is, and don't anybody take it from me. But Martha Stanford had a workers' compensation claim, and I almost thought, Joe, she was total transport, but she wasn't. She was a different trucking line. She was a truck driver with her husband. So they were team drivers. And she claimed that he had stopped abruptly, causing her, she was in the cab, to fall forward in between the seats and hit the back of her neck on a cooler, causing a cervical injury. That's this upper part of your spine called the cervical spine. And so she filed a claim for workers' compensation benefits. But as we started digging into it, things just didn't add up. There were some inconsistencies with the time. There were inconsistencies between what she was reporting and what she told the doctor immediately after. There were some inconsistencies about the location and the exact method. But one of the things she had going for her is the only witness was her husband. So, for her, that's a pretty favorable witness, his bias notwithstanding. We get all of this, we get together, and we're about to go to trial, and out of the woodwork came the name of a coworker. And I can't remember exactly how she came up, but anyway, I called this woman and I was talking to her about it, and she started feeding me some information. Found out that Martha Stanford had gone on a cruise about the time of this accident, when she was claiming to be bedridden, completely unable to do anything. So I started really searching around and subpoenaing records and doing other things, and got this lot of wonderful information. But the most poignant out of all of it was her riding a horse in the ocean, the Caribbean Ocean, while smoking a cigarette and wearing one of those big life vests that you wrap around your waist. It was the most redneck thing you have ever seen in your life. This woman is in the ocean on a horse, smoking a cigarette while claiming to be completely unable to do anything. And I got this photo of her, and I loved it. I blew it up this big. I mean, a huge poster board. It was bigger than a regular poster board. And I walked into court holding that thing under my arm. And everybody just started looking, and the jig was up at that point. I mean, she came unglued. She couldn't stop looking at that photo. I kept it for years. We actually kept it when we moved offices twice. It was that good. I don't have it anymore, unless it's behind a cabinet. But that was pretty interesting to me, finding all of that information and getting it all together, and then just saying, you're a liar. And here's the photo that proves you're a liar. And there were a bunch of other things, but that was it. That was what sealed the case.
That really makes me think about maybe some shows that you could watch on TV when you see attorneys in court and different things they do behind the scenes. How realistic are those shows? Like,
Oh,
is
no.
that really what attorneys do? No?
Maybe Mike has had the greatest Perry Mason moment, but that's as close as I've ever gotten to it. In fact, they take all the fun out of it now in what's called discovery. So the court years ago set up these rules that are designed to prevent what's called trial by ambush. So you're not supposed to go and ambush this person with this other evidence in most situations. You got to tell them. I had to give them a copy of this photograph, but that's no fun. I want to walk in there and just show up with it, but I didn't get to do that. Oh, I found her file. I found her file. Let me see. Can I share it? Can you give me the screen?
You should be able to share.
Can you see it?
It's starting to there. Oh, there we go.
And that's not the only one.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
my.
I mean, there's a whole Rolodex of them. I just don't know. So there was a lot of other information, but that was it. That was the one that I just thoroughly enjoyed.
I didn't even know riding horses in the ocean was a thing.
I didn't either.
Oh, wow.
She obviously didn't think that I was going to find her in the Caribbean.
Nope.
That's classic.
Yeah.
That's classic. Well, I've never had a moment like that. The closest thing might be a termination case that I tried trying to terminate the rights of a father in a step-parent adoption. And one of the grounds we were alleging was that he had abandoned his children because he did not maintain contact with them, and he certainly hadn't supported them. And his defense on the witness stand was that his ex-wife had blocked his telephone number and was refusing his calls. So I looked at him and I said, "You have your cell phone in your pocket?" And he said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Is your ex-wife's number on that phone?" And he said, "Yes." And I turned around, looked at my client sitting at counsel table, and I said, "Do you have your phone in your purse?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Would you take it out, please, and lay it on the table?" And she did. And I looked at him and I said, "Call your ex-wife." And he called it. As soon as he called, her phone started ringing. And the judge just looked at him and said, "I don't think she's blocked your calls."
That's awesome. It's really satisfying. I mean, it maybe shouldn't be, but it's satisfying to catch people in lies like that and to prove, you're not being honest and I've caught you basically. There's a myth, obviously, that attorneys make a lot of money. Is that true, or does it? I mean, I'm sure it depends on the type of attorney you are and the practice that you're with. But as a general average, what are your thoughts on that for any of them that are thinking about becoming an attorney?
Don't quote your hourly rate.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It depends on who the lawyer is and what they do. So I give the personal injury lawyers a hard time because they have these contingent fee cases, and so they settle this big case and take a third or 40% of the settlement proceeds as their fee. And I'm like, I'm an hourly wage slave. I mean, I just bill by the hour. And so if I work, I get paid. And if I don't, I don't. But I don't have any of these big windfalls. So, I mean, it just depends on what you do and who your employer is. If you're working for somebody, I'm like Reed. I work for myself and only answer to the clients. And so, lawyers can be well compensated, and some of them make less than a school teacher.
Yeah, it does range pretty significantly based on a lot of things, not only the area of law that you practice, but the geographical area that you practice. A lawyer in DC is going to make significantly more than a lawyer in Mississippi or Kansas or whatever else. But There are some pretty interesting statistics if you ever want to get out there and look them up. I was looking right now. When they adjust for things such as the cost of living and so forth, some of these smaller states do pretty well. But I was going to look and see if I could find the Tennessee. I don't know where it is. As far as the adjusted income. So the average hourly rate. Now, I'll come back to this and explain that the hourly rate is not how much the attorney makes, but the average hourly rate in Tennessee is $221 an hour. And then adjusted for the cost of living, it's effectively $245 an hour. Now, compare that with Atlanta, it's $306 an hour, and Washington, D.C. is $354 an hour. None of that tells you anything about how much the attorney actually makes, other than general trends that if you bill more and you charge more per hour, then you're going to make a little bit more. But there are some areas of the law that do not nearly as well as far as compensation. Family law, domestic law is one of the areas that is not very well paying at all. And that's unfortunate but it's also understandable because you're dealing with a lot of people that are on dire times and so forth. I'm gonna quit talking and let Blake ask his question.
I was wondering, as in like attorneys and stuff, where exactly can you get your information? What are the limits to where you can get your information from?
Do you mean, Blake, regarding things like salary and compensation, or do you mean information that I might use in a case?
Information that you might use in a case.
There's not many specific limitations on where I could get information. An attorney has what's called subpoena power. And then there are also powers to make someone give a deposition, which is question and answer under oath, but not in a court, things of that sort. But I can subpoena records and make someone give them to me. But most of what I get, the good stuff, comes from a witness. It comes from a family member who knows someone. Another good source, though, is Facebook. People put everything in the world on Facebook. Stay off of Facebook and Snapchat and all that other stuff. I don't think it's worth it. But it's worth it to me because it's one of the first places I go looking for something. In fact, I did it last night and found something very troubling for one of my clients, and I had to have a conversation with her today and say, I don't know why you put this up there, but it does not help.
I think one of the things that, and we've had a couple of different speakers on about the digital world and once it's out there, it's very hard to get back. So the conscious effort of making sure you don't put dumb stuff on the internet is really key. And Mike and Reed, you're probably similar to me, coming through in high school and college and stuff. It wasn't nearly as what it is today, right? Social media was not there when I graduated high school or even college. I guess it came in after that, or pretty close nearby college probably. But what the kids are these days, they get infiltrated with all of this different social media and different things. So we do have multiple classes on that of knowing that once you hit that send button, it doesn't matter if you know that person or you don't, or they're your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. At that precise time, it becomes an image or something that you've sent that now is out in digital land, and you can't get it back. So once you send it, it's there and it's forever there. Obviously you can go in and delete things, but that doesn't really delete it. There's a lot of things that are still out there. And if Reed or Mike have to go looking for something and they know that there was an image, then they can go subpoena the backside of different servers and different things to go get images that maybe aren't on the front end of things. But just some of that, right? Just knowing that the security of what you're doing on a daily can affect your life for long term. And once it's digital, it's out there.
It's well said. I use Facebook a lot too, Reed. I find a lot of my birth parents post all kinds of junk on there.
Yeah, I bet. It's just,
I use it for different reasons. As far as like if people email and want to volunteer, I will check out their Facebook page and see what kind of person they are. Would they be a good fit to volunteer with teenagers or different things? So Facebook's definitely useful in many different ways, but also, yes, can get you in trouble for sure.
I mean, I would say that if you're going to get a job, regardless of what you're getting a job in, your employer or future employer is looking you up in social media these days.
Mhm.
I was about to say that, Joe. I do it on every person that I hire. I go and look at their Facebook.
That's smart. Or LinkedIn, and like you said, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, all of them.
Yeah, LinkedIn is useful for some business information and so forth, but I want to go see if they're posting drunk selfies on Facebook and that kind of stuff. I want to know what kind of person I'm getting more than
That's true.
Their filtered LinkedIn stuff.
Good point.
And it also tells me that if they're not smart enough to cleanse their Facebook page prior to applying, then I don't want them.
Truth.
What if they don't have a Facebook page?
You hire them right away.
Well, Katie, I will ask around and maybe they're not on Facebook, but they're on, I've never gotten on Snapchat. I don't know. But I'll look and see if they're on Instagram or somewhere else. And if they're not, then that just ends it. We also do a background search, but I'm not going to go and try to friend of a friend to get backdoor in that. I'm not that interested in it.
Most people that are doing bad things aren't thinking about not having one or trying to, they're just living life and that's the norm. So they usually walk right into it, is most cases.
Yeah, Mike reminded me of this with his comment of, I had a workers' compensation claim where this guy got on Facebook and he and his girlfriend, I guess, live streamed them doing crack. Why would you put that on Facebook? The employer saw it. He got fired the next day. But yeah, I can see how that would be particularly useful in some of your cases when you're talking about fitness as a parent and so forth.
That's like impressive. Wow.
I was watching it just saying, how could you be this stupid? How could you be this stupid?
I am sure that Mike meets many people on a daily basis that are that stupid.
Well, there was a pretty prominent business owner in town that had his name on a logistics company that got in trouble a couple of years back in Colorado with his son driving a Tesla off the side of the mountain with 4 teenage kids in it. And there was some Snapchat video from that night that wound up incarcerating the 2 parents and the son on things that could send them up for 30 or 40 years because of just being stupid. So it's not, it's an everyday thing, unfortunately, that happens. But usually people get in the wrong circles and it's not, it's life decisions and it's one that after another that leads them down that path. But the video nowadays with cell phones and everything, the video that can be found is pretty amazing. Everybody has a cell phone, and everybody, like, you have to consider everybody's watching you when you're out and about, because you never know who's recording what, and your actions are being recorded by closed circuit TVs and cell phones and everything else. So I'd say in the law side of things, you guys have the ability to subpoena that and subpoena transactional records on financials and bank statements and different things of where they've spent money or where they've gone and done different things and what they haven't. It's probably, Mike, in your world, you've been able to either prove that they're supporting them in some form or fashion, or prove the opposite, where they haven't sent a dime to them or bought anything for them, using that same type of record collecting.
Right.
All right. Well, we don't need to hold you guys up if there's no more questions. I don't know that.
Yeah, we want to respect Mr. Jennings and Mr. Martz's time. So do you guys have any more questions? No? Okay. Anything else you want to share, gentlemen, before we end with the kids?
Not for me.
No? Okay.
Can't think of anything. I'll be interested to learn if Katie actually pursues political science and international law. You got lots of time to think about that.
She does. She graduated from Collegiate High, so she has an associate's degree, and she's planning on MTSU for 2 or 3 years, and then Virginia for law school, maybe. I don't know. She's got like it all mapped out, far more prepared and thought out than I ever did at her age. So I don't know.
Hey, Katie, I tried to get into the University of Virginia Law School and they turned me down. So
Oh,
that's probably a pretty good place to go if you really are serious about international law. But I generally tell people, if you know where you want to practice law, like, there's a guy here in Chattanooga and he went to Harvard. Who cares in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that the guy went to Harvard? But the guy that went to UT Law School, he's got a network all over the state of guys he went to school with that are now judges. So anyway, it depends on what you want to do. So.
yeah. And that was a really good point, Katie. If he's going to stay in Tennessee, going to school in Tennessee, having that network is probably huge.
Or you can be like Reed and a member of every bar in the country. It's pretty
impressive.
That too. Don't do that. Pick a state and just be content with that.
Reed's market of law right now is the better part of about 1,000 miles, depending on what he wants to go do. So
yeah, he's like an SEC lawyer. He's already got 4 of the states down.
That's awesome.
That's because he didn't go to an SEC school, though.
Well, we got Ole Miss. Were you there when Eli was playing?
I was.
Were you like his best friend?
No.
Oh.
He had a lot of best friends.
I bet he had. Everybody wanted to be his friend. I still remember the University of Georgia getting on the campus bus when Herschel Walker was a freshman, and you kids do not even know what I'm talking about. But Herschel Walker was a freshman, and he was on the front page of Sports Illustrated. I just had seen it, and I got on the bus, and Herschel got on the bus with me.
Very cool. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys go because I want to respect your time. And I greatly, again, appreciate you being here tonight. I think that a lot of good information was shared, some good questions asked, some great nuggets dropped as well. So thank you so much again. And you have a wonderful evening. And it was really nice to meet you both too. And Mike, we've talked obviously, but meet you in person, and Reed, nice to meet you as well. Or it's so weird to say meet because, it is like meeting, but it's not all at the same time. I don't know.
It works.
It works.
And Reed, welcome to town.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Have a good evening.